Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, coming to you 6 days a week as we interview whitetail experts and hear their traditions and personal stories of the hunt. Learn more about the latest gear, discover proven tips, and the latest strategies so you can make your next hunt a success. Now, here's your host, Bruce Hutchin.
Hey folks, we got a new sponsor. It's called Buckwild Coffee. What's so special about Buckwild Coffee? Well, a gazillion people go to Starbucks every day and drink coffee. Well, why shouldn't Buckwild Coffee offer you light, medium, or dark roast with free shipping? All you have to do is go to whitetailrendezvous.com, go to shop, and order your coffee, and I'll ship it out for free. Hey, thanks so much for visiting Buckwild Coffee. The best brew in the West, the best brew around the campfire, the best brew in the hunting shack, the best brew anywhere. Buckwild Coffee. Get yours today. So we're recording now. So Todd, it's just great to be back. You were on the show way back. I think you were one of the first 100 episodes. So this is a warm-up, folks, and Todd and I are going to catch up a little bit here before we get into the podcast about White Knuckles production. But Todd, what's been going on since the last year and a half, 2 years?
Holy cow, Bruce! It's been crazy. We sold one business and started a new business, and between hunting and property management and family life, it's been pretty much a blur, to be honest. I've been working really, really hard on a new company and on whitetails, man. It never ends. But like last year, I had the best whitetail season of my life. I killed 3 different 7-year-old whitetails, 2 with a bow and 1 with a muzzleloader, and just a dream season. I'll never duplicate again.
Wow! Make sure I just wrote that down because we'll touch on the 2017 season. Yeah, I rolled my truck in just north of Eau Claire, Wisconsin on October 30th and never hunted.
Oh, my gosh.
Walked away.
Oh,
God.
My gosh. You're kidding me.
No, I walked up the hill. I just crossed the Chippewa River, and I was heading up to Rice Lake, actually Birchwood, my buddy's farm. We had a wonderful 10-pounder on the camera. He was big. He was mature deer, big mature deer, everything you'd want. And so we had a strategy. We were going to hunt him, and he had guys that he knew how to hunt, and we were going to hunt him, and one of us should have had a shot. Well, I never made it.
Oh, my gosh, dude. That's, well, I'm glad you're okay. That's kind of scary.
Well, it was real scary. I hit black eyes. You know, I wasn't cited for anything. The highway patrol said there's nothing you could do. You hit it, your back end went, and you were gone. And we're glad you're walking out of here.
Oh, no kidding. Well, I'm glad you're okay, man. That's you missed your hunt, but you can catch up later in life.
So I say that, Todd, just to say, wherever you're going, running early, running late, just be really smart and just be safe out there. And I tell that to everybody. Because with a flick, there was absolutely nothing I do. I did the NASCAR thing. I just folded my arms over my chest and said, just wrote it out.
Oh man. Well, I'm glad you're okay. That can be, black ice is dangerously scary, man. And just in regard to safety, it's kind of the one thing I always end any conversation, especially this time of year with any hunters, is just, make sure you wear your safety harnesses. And if you can, use lifelines in your tree stands, just because it can happen really, really fast, and we're all in a big hurry to try to get up under tree stands and, be ready for that big buck when it comes through or whatever. But, you can't take enough time to be safe.
Yeah, and I agree, and I'm hunting from the ground this year. I don't know if I'll get up and even to a double set, a ladder set, double ladder.
Sure.
I'll probably will just hunt from the ground, which is fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm hunting. So anyway. So just, wanted to catch you up on that. So I kind of had a little epiphany, not a lot of epiphany. I've always been a believer in God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit, but it was like, okay, why did you save me?
Oh man, that's got to be scary.
Yep.
Got to be scary.
So anyway, moving right ahead. So you had a world class. You had dream season. Okay, and then we started. Now, how long ago did you start White Knuckles production?
Oh, I think this is our 12th year.
Now, you were doing that when you had the other company, Wicked Tree.
Yeah. I started White Knuckle back in the day. We were selling DVDs, so we produced I think about 10 DVDs over 8 years, and about 3 or 4 years ago we stopped producing DVDs. It just with the way the web is, everything's kind of shifted. So we just do a web show and a podcast now. But whitetails have always been like I'm just a whitetail machine, man. That's what I was born to do, I guess you could say. And so it's been really kind of fun to use the new technology. I mean, even right now, I just downloaded this app that we're talking on right now, and it's just amazing what we have out there on the video side. And
yeah,
it's nuts. It just changes so quick. But no, we started out doing DVDs and kind of phased into the web stuff, but we've never really looked at White Knuckle Productions as being like, a money-making business. It's a business of passion, and it helps support, the companies that we work with, our sponsors, as well as, my companies that I produce a variety of products with. So we're able to kind of keep it a little bit more down to earth and raw, and it's not an infomercial. We pretty much just share our stories as they happen, and in just a unique way. It's just far more relatable, I'd say, for any whitetail hunter. And you don't have to be crazy serious or not. We're all a bunch of nuts, but there's just a lot of great information, some great people, and we kill some world-class whitetails every year. And this past season, I was able to kill a buck, about a 190 class typical that is the biggest typical framed whitetail I've ever seen in the woods, and it just was absolutely insane. We got everything on video. Just released the story here last week, and it has been blowing up.
Good for you. Now, what are the other business you're involved in?
Well, the new one I just started is called Tree Thrasher, and it's a new kind of call. And I know when people hear the beginning of these the new product stuff, especially when it comes to new calls, they're thinking, oh, what kind of a gimmick is this? But
sure.
The background story on Tree Thrasher is I basically Tree Thrasher.
Thrasher, okay.
Yeah, Tree Thrasher. But I've been hunting here in Iowa for a long time, and I've hunted some properties that were completely unpressured, absolutely unbelievable many years ago, 10, 15 years ago. And deer would just come into calling like crazy, especially you could rattle deer in throughout the season. It was amazing. The deer just had no pressure, and they weren't educated by other hunters. But when I bought my farm at a different location here, I had a lot more hunting pressure around me, a lot more neighbors. And over the part of the first season I was hunting here, I kind of realized, like, holy moly, there's a lot of guys around, and they're calling aggressively. I would listen to one neighbor rattle and can call and grunt and bleat and basically for their entire hunt. On one side of my property, I'd go to the other side, listen to a different neighbor, and I did that. I had 3 different encounters in a matter of a few days, and I was just like, oh, my Lord, no wonder rattling doesn't work here. I've never been able to rattle in any mature bucks, and I just felt like it was just kind of a light bulb went off, like, well, now I know why they're not calling to aggressive calling, so I just had to change my calling strategy because I just was not calling in these big, mature 5, 6, 7-year-old deer that were on camera. And so I just started figuring out, I'm like, well, they must have my number. So
yeah, that's kind of like elk hunting out here in Colorado, where we've since Wayne Carlton, and Greg Pink started the diaphragm turkey call. That's a long time ago. Sure. But all I do is I'll call at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, maybe for locator. And then all the rest is just estrus calls and, muse. And, that's all I use, because I call in more people every year than I call in elk. I do. It's really fun. Except they walk in and they get an arrow knocked. I'm going, oh, shit.
Well, I just kind of came to the conclusion, like, all right, my system's not working, so I need to change my system. And so I honestly, it took me just stop carrying my rattling antlers, because if I brought them along, I'd be tempted, and sure enough, I'd end up using them. But what happens with rattling is these deer can hear it from hundreds and hundreds of yards, and they've patterned it. Oh, it's insane. But the problem with rattling is you can't duplicate the sound of a real big buck fight. I've in 30 years of hunting, I've heard one big buck fight in the timber in my life, and it was about probably 6 or 7 years ago. We actually have the whole thing on video. We couldn't actually see the bucks fighting, but we could hear them. And when it started, I didn't know what it was. I'm like, what in the heck is my neighbor doing, driving a truck through the woods? I mean, that's what it sounded like, just thrashing trees, breaking branches, and just a thunderous noise of two monster animals pushing each other around the timber. You could barely even hear the antlers. You could just hear crashing of timber. But deer came running from all directions. Like 10 deer in 30 seconds, does, fawns, bucks, little bucks, everything just came running to that sound. And me and my cameraman are up in the tree stand cheering, like, oh, my, unbelievable. This is incredible.
Kind of like a schoolboy fight in a schoolyard?
It's exactly right. They knew it was real because it sounded real. And, man, it worked. Everything came in. They wanted to see what bucks were fighting. And the does and fawns, too, I couldn't believe it. But they came from all directions, and we were in a really good area where deer were bedded around us. And we were filming a beautiful 3-year-old buck we called tuna fish. Or actually, it was 4 at the time. And he had come in and bedded by us. We were filming him bedded down, and the fight broke out. He jumped right up, stood up, and ran right to it. But the problem with rattling is you can't duplicate those other noises. So if you're up in a tree just making the click, click, rattle, rattle, I can hear the difference, and I don't live in the woods, and I don't live and die by my senses. So imagine the way a whitetail buck when he's laying in his bed and he hears this clickety, clickety, click, clickety, click, and then 20, 30 minutes later, he hears the same sound coming from the same location. He knows exactly what you are, and you will just not see that deer. And a lot of guys have been calling in the same tree stands year after year after year with the same calling methods. And I believe that deer learn a lot of their instinct and their knowledge comes from their mother the first year of their life by following her around, imitating her actions, reactions, what she does, what she eats, and what she's afraid of. And then you can imagine a buck when he's like 1 year old or 2 years old, he separates from mama, goes and starts living with other bucks, and then he's imitating the head bucks in those, the alpha bucks, the dominant deer in those bachelor groups. So these deer literally are learning from generation and generation after generation of animals, and that instinct is pounded into their behaviors. So it's not just if you're hunting a 5-year-old deer, it's not just 5 years of knowledge that buck is carrying or possessing. I believe they actually carry many generations of knowledge, and if you have many generations of hunters that have been hunting the same way on your property, on field edges, the same ladder stands, whatever it is, the deer have just patterned you. So as soon as you start making those calls from those same locations, it's instinctually, okay, they know what it is, and you just won't see them.
That's so interesting. And what I found in my 3 years and 500 and some odd episodes is that your first 3 sits are your best sits, and you never sit the same stand in a series of 3 in any 1 year. So the guys that are doing that are extremely successful because of what you just said, because they don't pattern them, and they run and gun, they move their stand. They're using hang up, even double ladders they can move, or ground blind they can move. But, I've gotten to the point, and I'm going to be able to hunt a number of states, and I'm going to hunt in 3s. I'm going to use my ground blind and hunt in 3s, and then, see what happens. But it's going to be an interesting experience because of that. But what you just mentioned, folks, if you've been hunting the Buckmaster stand for year after year after year because you shot during rifle season, bow season, muzzleloader season, whatever, and your calling sequence doesn't change because we all have our own voice. When I elk hunt, I have my own voice. When I call coyotes, I have my own voice. When I call deer, I have my own voice. We all have our own voice. It doesn't sound like the tape, but you have to minimize that and do it, and then do it at the right time. And that's what we'll get into the show. I'm going to talk about the right time to rattle, because sometimes you can rattle and it doesn't work. Have you found that to be true? Not because of pressure.
I just think in general, and I'll tell you why rattling doesn't work as well. And again, Bruce, everything is based on goals. My goal is to kill the bucks that are 6, 7 years old that nobody else can kill around me.
Right.
If my goal was to kill any buck, then I would probably change my calling strategy. But those big ones have been around the block in order for them to survive to 5, 6, 7 years old.
Good point. Great point.
They can't. They literally, if they were to come to calling, they would have died years before. So for them to make it to that age, they've already survived the gauntlet of hunters around. So they're already very call shy. They're not coming in. Their personality is not aggressive. Otherwise, they would be dead. I mean, it's kind of forced evolution is what I call it. But my way of looking at things, I've had to change my system to these mature deer. And if your goal is to kill these bucks, then you really have to start from ground zero when it comes to calling, if you have not been calling them in the past. And I came to the conclusion many years ago that rattling just scared more deer than it attracted, so I quit rattling. And around that time, I started to see some of these big mature bucks. But back to rattling real quick. A big mature deer walking around during daylight, during hunting season, is a pretty rare situation. It really anywhere. I mean, there's farms that have, huge farms, some of these big names own, that the deer are comfortable and they are up moving around. But for the rest of us, big bucks just don't move that much during daylight. So now you're trying to recreate a scenario of two big bucks that are up on their feet moving around during daylight that happen to meet and fight. And that is such a rare occasion that in 30 years I've heard it once. And I hunt 100 different sets a year, 50 days basically of whitetail hunting. And I've been doing it for 15 years now, hunting full time. And I've only heard one real big buck fight in all that time. So when you start rattling, that's a very rare occurrence. There's not a lot of big buck fights out there. And if you're trying to kill that old mature buck, he doesn't care about two little dink bucks clicking their antlers together. That's not going to call him in. What gets under his skin is it's a dominance thing, is that somebody's invaded his territory, and that's what you're basically doing is you're trying to piss off a buck essentially when you rattle. And it does it. But they're just not, the other sounds aren't there, that you're just not going to dupe them. So that's where I started just grunting, and not more than a single time in a row in cadence. So, the typical, I don't know where it came from, but everybody grunts 3 times. Grunt, 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 and then you stop or whatever. And that's how I was taught years ago, and I came to the conclusion that's not even realistic, because a buck doesn't stand in one location and grunt continuously. It usually will grunt once, and that's about it. Occasionally you hear him grunt multiple times, but it's always when they're moving through the timber. So that.
What about a tending grunt? What about a tending grunt?
I don't believe in all these different variety of calls, all these grunts. You can go bah, 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 and that's fine, but you better be running through the woods when you do it, because otherwise it's not going to sound natural. You've got to have the other noise, because the deer's always chasing, right? So you're always going to have leaves and breaking branches and all that stuff. So I just came to the conclusion for the bucks I was hunting, one grunt every 20 to 30 minutes, and I always change it up. Every single grunt's different. I use a grunt call, a grunt tube, one call. The next call, I'll use my voice, and I'll always project it in a different direction, so it sounds like a different deer, different situation. It's just no two grunts are the same. So why are you sounding the same with every grunt? That's what you got to really.
That was my point about everybody has a voice, and the elk know my voice because I hunt the same basin, right?
Absolutely. So this tree thrasher product kind of came from necessity. I'd be sitting on the edge of these buck bedding areas in stands that I don't hunt more than a couple times a year. And so you spend all the time and energy getting those stands ready. And in some cases, I spend 10 to 12 hours on a stand, which is hard for some people to believe. But by the time you cut access trails, mark access trails, hang your stand, and trim them all out, mine are, for self-filming, I got to have good lanes. So I put a lot of time in these spots. When I'm in there hunting and I'm sitting there and I know a buck could be better within 100 yards and my grunt strategy hasn't been working and it's starting to get dark, there's no frustration like it, because you know that there is a possibility you could call one out. You just don't have a tool to do it. And what I started doing over the years was just using my rattling antlers, like bringing one antler and rubbing on a tree, just trying to create sounds that accompany a real animal moving through the timber, acting like a buck in the timber, thrashing trees, breaking branches, that sort of thing. But there was just nothing available. So I started 3 years ago. It came into my brain. I'm like, my God, if you could create a tool that created the sound of rustling leaves, breaking branches, and the sound of a buck rubbing on a tree, and be able to use those sounds individually or together and accompany that with a single grunt, it would absolutely work, because it just sounds natural. That's what a buck sounds like. A buck doesn't sound like just grunting and standing in one location, not moving. Usually when they're making an audible, intentional, loud noise, it's because they feel comfortable, they feel safe in the area they're in, obviously. If they're not going to be thrashing a tree and making all sorts of racket if they think a hunter's right there. But that sends a signal. So it's a form of communication animals have, whitetails have, where if they hear that noise of another animal making intentional noise, they know it's safe over there. And sure enough, it becomes a hub of activity. They want to come and see what's going on over there. What's the ruckus about? So
now, is that in beta testing, or how do I get one to take the 4 states I'm hunting this year?
We're just in production right now. We're actually going to get our first shipment the end of next week, I believe.
Can you send me one?
Yes, absolutely. Do me a favor and shoot me an email after this, Bruce, and remind me. I've got a list going, but I would love to. But basically, I just realized if I could create some secondary noises to go
Thank
with
you.
just my oh, absolutely. But if I could create these extra noises and not over the top, just a little bit of extra noise with a tending grunt, just like you're calling, or a buck grunt, just a deep breath, just before or just after some of these noises, I believed that it could increase the number of deer I would call in. And it's not some magic tool or some magic formula. It's just manipulating whitetails. And I've successfully manipulated big bucks out of their beds early and brought them right past my stand with my grunting procedures over the years. But big bucks are like a cat. I don't know. Do you have a cat, Bruce?
Nope.
Okay. I never would have considered myself a cat person, but we have a cat. My wife brought it home and it was forced on me, and now I love the little guy. But after watching cats and getting to know these things, cats have attitudes, and so do big bucks. They have attitudes, and
so does Todd Pringnitz.
Absolutely. But you gotta realize, like, when you're calling at these big old deer, like, they've heard it all, they've seen it all. So you've got to reach them instinctually and basically aggravate them. And that's how I describe my calling process. If there's a deer within ear sight, specifically bedded within earshot of me, I want to pick at them throughout an entire hunt and just aggravate them to the point where they don't have a choice. They are going to get up and come and investigate because it drives them crazy. But you can't do that with overcalling. With a cat, it's the same thing. If you try to force a cat to come to you or to do something, they're going to look the other way. But if you tease them, boom, here they come. And so it's the same principle. You've got to work these bucks, but you're doing it in a way no other hunter before has done. And so by adding some of these thrashing noises and the sounds of leaves, and I've got one right here, so I'm just going to give you an example.
Sure, go ahead.
Like for me, I generally am set in a situation. I pretend I'm a deer or a part of the herd. I'm like, all right, so I'm a buck. I walk up to a tree, so you either start scraping or maybe start putting his antlers.
And you're in your tree stand, correct? When you're doing all
this? Up in my tree. I use a ground blind. I actually called one of my big 8-pointers, a 160-inch 8-pointer, 7-year-old deer, called him with my tree thrasher in a ground blind situation. They actually work excellent in ground blinds because you don't have to worry about any of your movement. Right. And that's the one thing. You have to see the tool. It's very, very small. It's compact, but you can make a branch breaking noise, leaf noise together, and then the tool itself you can rub on the tree. So you can kind of layer those different sounds and use them individually based on what your situation is, because every stand is different. Every hunt is different. The noise level in each stand is different depending on how dry the leaves are. But, there's been many a times where I've been in excellent spots. It's been dead quiet and the leaves are really dry. And I feel like, man, I know if I call at all, it's just anything that's within hearing distance will know I'm a hunter because they don't hear the other sounds. They don't hear the sound of an animal walking around and then the grunt. And you just got to kind of think of it from that standpoint. So all the tree thrasher does for me is it just allows me to use a grunt call, my thrash noises. Whitetail hears those two things, puts 2 and 2 together, and it just increases the number of deer that come past my stand. And the number one thing that really surprised me in my testing this past year, I used it dozens and dozens of times on a bunch of hunts. And what is amazing is does are extremely attracted to the sound. I found myself making these thrashing noises, accompanying it with a grunt. Within 5 to 10 minutes, I would have a doe within 20 yards of my blinder stand. It's just something instinctually. They're driven to that sound. They're very curious to it. What is that? What's the animal doing over there? Do I need to be over there? Is there food over there? Is there another deer over there? It's just a social thing, but it works. It's amazing.
Amazing. So, folks, this was a warm-up with Todd Pringnitz from White Knuckles production, and it turned into a special edition. So this will be part 2 of his podcast, which I invited him to. So with that, Todd, we're gonna sign off now, and then we'll go to the podcast. Whitetail Rendezvous is pleased to announce a partnership with GoHunt.com. Who's GoHunt.com? Well, if you're a DIY hunter, you need the information at GoHunt.com/insider. Why? Because it provides 4,200 profiles, every unit, every species, and every season. Furthermore, they give in-depth analysis, interactive maps, unit access, and seasonal trends. Draws are very important, and they give you the most accurate information in the business. All this is available when you go to GoHunt.com/insider. Make sure you use promo code WR when you join Insider. You'll get a $50 gift card for GoHunt.com Gear Shop. All in all, if you're hunting out west in 2018, GoHunt.com Insider is where you need to be to get all the research information. When you use promo code WR, Whitetail Rendezvous receives a small commission from GoHunt.com.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, where you can listen and learn from the experts so you can be more successful on your next hunt. Until next time, listen, learn, and succeed.